The future of work is a joint venture, as it were, between humans and artificial intelligence. It's not that, you show up and you sit down in a chat interface and have a chat about your job. There is a job that does that, and that's called coding, which is why coding Copilot is so great. But for the rest of us, there's a series of tasks that we do that don't require breadth of our experience or our education or our insight or our creativity. We could do a lot more of those things if we got these things out of the way. These secondary tasks are going to be largely taken up by AIs.
Oren, welcome to Tech Scenes Unplugged.
Good to be here, Jeff.
Great to have you. I'm excited to have this conversation. So let's start from the top,
Okay.
which I always do. And I definitely want to get to a whole bunch of different points, but we're going to start with Barndoor. Tell me about Barndoor AI.
Well, Barndoor is a platform that will provide the governance and visibility needed for Agentic AI to be deployed in enterprises. So about a year ago, I saw a lot of coverage about how AI has not yet penetrated the enterprise and why we're not having AI in the enterprise. And it seemed that we were missing a big piece, and that piece was making sure that the AIs had access to the same tools and data that we humans do when we go and do our jobs. And in order to be able to safely give them that access, you need to have strict rules about what agents have access to what on behalf of which humans. What are they actually trying to do with that access? And you got to sort of watch them and make sure that they're doing or trying to do the right things before you let them even do things. And I felt that absent really a very granular, very effective means of both visualizing and then managing that access, that you're just not going to see a lot of uptake, and that you really had to sort of approach it from the standpoint of how do humans go into companies and get access to their tools, and with that, what is the extension of that? And it is not the same. Humans are different than agents. Humans have a conscience. If you tell them not to do something, they won't do it. Agents, as we know, don't necessarily do that. And humans are afraid of getting fired. And so if you have an agent that's not afraid of getting fired, it doesn't go, wait, before I do that, am I going to get in trouble? It just doesn't. And so you really have to manage it a whole lot more effectively and granularly.
So what's that look like?
Conveniently, right about the time we started our company, the folks at Anthropic realized that the protocol was necessary for agents to be able to access tools and information. And they came up with something called MCP, Model Context Protocol. And it's basically kind of like sort of extrapolating in a geeky way. There are these things called APIs, which are how computers talk to each other. And back in the API days, I ran an API management company a few years ago. We had a protocol called REST that basically simplified a lot of what APIs do. And MCP sort of simplifies how AIs interact with tools and data. And so because this protocol exists, we're able to, at Barndoor, we're able to act essentially as a proxy for the AIs. They think they're just calling an MCP server, but they're actually calling it through us. And by running it through our proxy, we're able to see what it's doing, look at at all the traffic and discern information from it and report that back, as well as enforce very, very granular rules based on the agent itself, plus the identity of the person using it and the various authorizations that you've given them.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. So backing up a little bit, you had mentioned this isn't your first time around the block.
Not my first time around. I've seen this movie before. Once upon a time, there were these things called APIs, and yet again, back I started Mashery, the API management company, in 2006 because I saw an opportunity to really take this very geeky sounding thing of this acronym called API and make it a means of having companies do business with each other and transact business or partner or be able to build on the building blocks that each other would provide.
Right.
And that hadn't really existed before. APIs were this thing that existed in a data center, and you found in clients and had to do all these, very technical things. And I was a business guy, and I wanted to make sure that I could empower people to say, "Oh, you're my new partner. Great. Here's the API key. Off you go." And so we started that company. I was CEO, and I ran it for 7 years, sold it to Intel, and I figured that everybody learned a lot of lessons from that period of time, and we would think about that the next time around. And then here we
Right.
are, watching the same movie again, and it's another opportunity to build something fun.
What are the similarities and the differences in?
Well, the similarities are that business is conducted by having access to tools and data. Fundamentally, most people don't show up at work and immediately start chatting with a PhD about what their job might be that day. Which is what a lot of people think that AI is. But
Right.
most people sit down and get access to tools and data and do things with it, and interact with it, and maybe create a work product that they might give to their boss. And the AI agentic workforce needs to be able to do that same thing. So the similarities are you have computers talking to other computers through a protocol, and that if you're going to essentially have that direct connection, you need to have a lot of visibility around it, and you need to have a lot of controls and guardrails and ability to on a very granular basis decide what's good and what's bad. What's different about it is that AIs are not just regular old computers, and they're also not regular old humans. They're sort of a third kind of concept. So they need to have there's a lot of similarities in terms of how you manage this stuff, but merely knowing what the AI is and who's using it is insufficient to decide what rights it can and can't be granted. And so there's additional layers of decisions and of visibility you need to really feel comfortable letting these fairly powerful tools with no conscience and no fear of being fired
Right.
let them loose in your most important data and tools.
Now, this seems like something that all companies will eventually embrace and use. Thinking about the market though, like and running Barndoor, like what's the beachhead or what's the angle that you're kind of processing the entry point?
Yeah, so the entry point is really very simple. So I mentioned that part of what we do is determine both in terms of the humans and the AIs what they have access to. So a company needs to be large enough that they have actual concerns about different people having access to different things. So they're probably running an identity access management tool like an Okta or a Ping or Entra or one of those things. So they're, companies that run those tend to be in the hundreds or thousands of people or larger. So that's kind of the world that cares about this right now. And then the second is that there's someone at the company where the CEO came and said, you have to make AI happen. I want to see some results with real ROI, right? And so if there's a mandate and a need in a company that they realize that embracing AI is going to be critical to competing and succeeding, either as a company or as a person in a particular job, those are the folks we want to talk to, and we want to help them succeed in that role.
Yeah. When you're talking to like investors and you haven't had any problem raising money because you are right at the right time doing this, like how do you paint the picture of the future of work?
The future of work is a joint venture, as it were, between humans and artificial intelligence. I mean, a certain kind of work. Obviously, we're talking about knowledge work here.
Right.
Welders and electricians are a different kind of work, right? But for the kind of work that we're talking here, the future of work, it's not that you show up and you sit down in a chat interface and have a chat about your job. There is a job that does that, and that's called coding, which is why coding co-pilots is so great. You really do spend a lot of time talking to super smart people about why your code doesn't work. But for the rest of us, there's a series of tasks that we do that don't require the breadth of our experience or our education or our insight or our creativity, that we could do a lot more of those things if we got these things out of the way. And that over time, these secondary tasks are going to be largely taken up by AIs. And that's starting to happen. It's happening in coding, obviously. It's happening in marketing. We have a marketing team that consists of a VP of marketing and a few contractors, but we're not going to build out a huge team there, right? So there's a lot of these areas where what used to be done by a larger group of, let's say, less experienced people sort of learning on their way up will now be done through these agentic workflows, and it'll free us up to really better spend our time figuring out exactly what our customers need and delivering it to them.
Right. I feel like for me too, I feel like I work with a lot of teams.
Yeah.
And the work that I do is to get these teams like opening up, connecting, defining what they need to do, what's working, what's not working, where to place their bets, model it in a way that we can track that, learn from it. And we do that in a cadence every 90 or 180 days where we're looking at this, resetting where we're going, 3 year, 1 year. We use OKRs, KPIs, metrics. The thing that I think is interesting, and I keep on kind of coming back to myself, is like, I still feel like we're building a world where humanity is going to still be making the decisions. Right? I feel like
they're going to they make the decisions, and part of how they make the decisions is by putting the right guardrails on the agents, so the agents aren't making the decisions. Now, there's some kinds of decisions that AI is really, really good at making. That if I want to place a bunch of ads on Google, AIs would be a whole lot better at deciding how to allocate that spend and figure it out than I as a human, because it just can process massive quantities of data. And that's a fairly low risk thing that I'm willing to trust it to do. It might blow some of my marketing budget, but probably not any worse than I would. Right. So there are some decisions that they will be making, and then there will be other things that aren't really necessarily decisions per se, but there's creativity. There's things you want to explore. There's things you want to sort of think over, and where there may or may not be a quote right answer, but you as a human decide which direction you want to go with it.
Right. Well, from someone that's coming also from this theater background and improv background, right? I believe Groundlings is improv.
That is improv, yes. I never actually performed there, much to my chagrin, but I was running the company for a while. So that was a very interesting job. Very interesting job.
So, but from an element of creativity, like I kind of envision there's craft to people's work, and you learn and experience. And I think like leveraging AI is to leverage data and information maybe in a way that we've never been able to leverage it before, but allowing us to still make some of those larger decisions, maybe not the exact, like you said, the marketing spend on, advertising, but really thinking about like the direction we want the company to go based on the information that we have, that of our users. My hope is that we're still going to be going down that path where the humans are working at that level of decision making.
Yeah, and I think we will. I think at a certain point, there are things that if you get deep in working with these large language models, they often will asymptotically approach the same set of decisions, and that's not necessarily how great new businesses are formed, how great new products are created and thought up. There's an element of, well, you have this business problem and this set of data and this set of tools and this set of things, and then someone goes, wow, but if you did it in this wacky way over here, that's going to change everything. And at this point, I'm not seeing that kind of insight from these models.
Right. Yeah, I think I like to think of it as kind of intelligence in the way that it's collaborative. So like collaborative intelligence. It's
Yeah,
interesting even when you're making decisions or you're thinking about something, trying to find your blind spots, to use AI and what your maybe objectives or what you're trying to accomplish, and see what it would generate and see if it aligns with some of the things you're thinking of. If there's some things there that you didn't think of, I
yeah,
think it's a really interesting tool in a way to collaborate with something that doesn't get exhausted of talking about it, right? Like
yeah,
some people
yeah,
are like,
exactly,
I don't want to talk about
exactly.
this anymore. You're like, but I want to keep
Yeah,
on drilling down this thing, right?
exactly,
Like
exactly.
I think it's thinking of it as collaborative intelligence in some aspects. To find those things that you're maybe missing that you wouldn't be able to miss, or find before. So
Sure.
I think AI in the future of the workplace is going to be very interesting. One
Hmm.
of the things you and I talked about before is potentially that talent development gap,
Yeah.
though. I was
Yeah, and
wondering if you want
that's
to
an interesting
expound on that.
issue. Sure, so what we just talked about how well, okay, I don't need that sort of rote work to get done that I needed to get done before. The humans who used to do that for me were the early career people who were sort of using that as experience to sort of watch what's happening and eventually gain both proficiency in whatever their job is, as well as usually some deep domain knowledge that would qualify them to sort of move up to that senior position. And sort of today, we're hiring the senior people, they're using AI. Um, but we haven't, as a society, yet figured out how to bridge that gap and bring in the early career folks. If you were Google, you would hire bunches and bunches of engineers straight out of school. I was an engineer straight out of school. I came out of MIT with a degree in electrical engineering and computer science. I didn't know how to ship a product. I had no idea what I was doing. And I went to work at Hughes Aircraft and I learned from the folks who had been doing this a while. I didn't have to learn how to write code, but I did have to learn how to actually be useful as an engineer.
Mm-hmm.
And and then ultimately that I started learning a bit more about product and I sort of meandered away and did the theater thing and came back into technology. But I, that bridge through early career is something that we as a society, and frankly, it may end up happening that AI plays a part in that. That
Yeah.
that you through simulations, through there would be something whereby companies like ours that can't afford to hire a bunch of early career people and sort of educate them on our investors' capital, um, that there is some means by which they will be able to make that jump.
Kind of makes me think of like heavy machinery or something like that. Like, you maybe will first learn how to use a shovel before they put you like in a backhoe
Mm-hmm.
behind. It's like
Yeah,
how do you just throw someone in
absolutely.
that position, right? Like, so there's
No,
going to be
absolutely.
this
Well,
gap.
look, we built a house upstate a few years ago, and I remember when they started breaking ground. You talk about the backhoe, and this very experienced excavator operator. He knew exactly how close he could get to the edge with this multi-ton machine without it falling in and dig the hole. Like, you can't do that on day one.
Well, I'm sure, I do have some ed tech clients, and I know a lot of them are trying to understand how to, create AI or leverage AI for training. So
Mm-hmm.
I think there might be able to bridge some gaps there. It is interesting too, like, my generation, like I knew how to fix a car, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
if something broke, I could open
Yeah,
up the hood, I could figure out, oh, this or
there
that,
actually was an
probably
engine
could
in the
fix
hood.
it.
There wasn't just a hole there where the batteries are underneath, right?
100%. And that's what I drive now, is what you just described. And like if that breaks, um, I can still operate them, both of them, right? Like, but if this
Mm-hmm.
breaks, I'm not able to fix it.
No.
And I think, it would be interesting. Engineers in the future may just not understand the code that's under the hood
Oh
of
yeah,
these systems that they're
absolutely,
building.
absolutely.
And if you look at
Well,
like
and already they don't necessarily entirely. I mean, there's a lot of mystery as to what happens inside these models and why. And
right.
there's a lot of experimentation, and we're still learning a lot.
Speaking of learning, now you've had a couple of organizations from an operation
Mm-hmm.
and building teams and bringing
Mm-hmm.
in, executives. What are some of the lessons you learned from, Broadway that maybe works with you when you're building your teams and building things and producing something that's never been done before?
Yeah, I think they're very similar jobs actually. That in both cases you're sort of spinning something up from a standing start. You're going to people with money and saying, believe in this thing. And the amounts of money are actually similar to put on a Broadway show or start a software company. And
Yeah, how much does it cost to put on a Broadway show? How much do you have to raise?
the ones I've been involved in have ranged from $7 to $25 million capitalizations. So
Okay.
so they're in that realm, and we raised 13 and a half here, so we're right in the middle of that at Barndoor. And you assemble a team, right? The most important thing is assembling the team and having everybody sort of moving in the same direction and agreeing what you're doing, agreeing where you're trying to get to. And then the other thing that has to happen in both places is that people have to really want to be there. And they have to sort of believe in what's going on, believe in each other, and really sort of have each other's back. And if you do that, and then the other thing that is very similar is even with all of that, you still don't control your destiny. That there's, it's a petri dish. You're doing the best you can to make a thing that will be successful, but you cannot guarantee success. And you may do all the right things and not succeed. And you may screw up a bunch of things and still succeed. So it's very interesting in that way.
I want to go back and unpack a few of those elements that you said, because every single step was very interesting, especially to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the first one is like you were painting a vision of the future, selling this idea to investors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right?
Oh, absolutely.
And what's the role of the producer in which you play, like on Broadway? What is
so? There's
two
kinds. There's two kinds of producers. There's what is called the lead producer, or usually there's 2 or 3 or 4 of them in a show, and they're essentially collectively the CEO of the show. They make all the decisions. They hire the director. They hire everybody, and they raise the money and make all of the business decisions. And then there are co-producers who are advisors generally to those folks, and also go out and raise money. They get an allocation of money that they raise, that they're expected to either write the check themselves or get people to write. So there's sort of a bundler in that respect. So the shows I've done so far on Broadway have been as a co-producer, but I have one show I'm working on as a lead producer as well. Okay. And so, but that won't be on Broadway for a few years. These things take forever. So that first initial stage, though, is like painting a picture of the future and why we're doing this, what we're building, what we're creating. Exactly.
And then the next step you said
we certainly did that with Barndoor. So I had this basic idea, and I went to a few people that I thought could collaborate with me, and we had some meetings and we talked through it. And we, what is it? What isn't it? How would we describe it? How would we go to someone and say, this is something you should believe in, and we are a team you should believe in.
Right.
And that was a lot of storytelling, which is involved in both places. And then you get to a point where you believe the story is ready to tell to someone. So then you start going and telling it to people, and you see if it resonates. We were fortunate at Barndoor that I went to a VC, a great guy by the name of Eric Chin at Crosslink, and he believed in it, and we had a term sheet within a week. And so that made it easier to. And to me, that was a great validation point that we were onto something, and that in turn let the other investors and say, look, Eric's on board and his team's on board, and so you should join us as well. And a bunch of them did, and then here we are.
I think the interesting thing you said too, though, is it started with that vision. It started like sharing that vision, but as you put that vision together, and I think a lot of people kind of miss this, that vision is not only important for the investors, it's important to what you said is you need to build your team. Right?
Oh, sure.
That brings people in. That brings people
absolutely.
in.
No, part of why we raised the money we did, we're not spending it all in day one, right? We're 23 people, do the math. We're not, burning through this super fast. But to get the quality and the experience and the specialization of the people that we needed to build this, and folks who would do it quickly and do it well and that sort of thing, these are folks who don't want to go somewhere that doesn't have any money, that's always going to be running out of money next quarter and needs to go raise more. And they want to have some validation. When you're hiring people early career, some people will take you went to school X and that's a proxy for, there was some process that said, okay, you're okay. So that means you sort of made it through a thing like that. This is the same sort of thing. I'm able to go to, a great engineer and say, look, I went to these awesome investors and they have a really good track record and they believe in this and I believe in this. And, my track record is what it is. And so we're all believing in this and we're believing that you should be part of this. It has worked out pretty well for us.
Yeah. I think the piece, though, that I think a lot of people miss is once you can put a vision together, that's what attracts great talent. Oh, yeah, you raise the capital, obviously, based on that vision. But a lot of people miss the fact of that vision of what you're building and where you want to go and what you want to do is the best talent, period. Go to the best opportunities.
Well, and you have to be able to communicate it in the way that others can communicate it. So I didn't personally hire every engineer, but I was able to communicate it to my technical co-founder, to my product co-founder, to a recruiter we use, and to my co-founder who's head of people in HR. And they're able to take a vision that I sort of set a certain way, and they're able to make it their own, but still consistent with what we're doing in a way that they know what it's going to be compelling to the audience they're talking to. And an engineer is going to get excited about a different element to that vision than I am, as it should be.
Yep. And then the next thing that you said, again, I'm taking this back because this is like how you laid that out is so in line with how I believe how things happen and should progress. You said, then we need to agree. And I see, so that's like, you have the big vision that attracted the people and are attracting people because it's an evolution as you grow. But then we need to agree on what we need to do, how we're going to do it, who's going to do it, when it's going to get done by, and what priority. I feel like a lot of teams, what they miss is they want focus and they're like, oh, we're not focused. And it's typically what I've learned because nobody goes to school for this. And I've asked thousands and thousands of people before, like how we get focus is to agree. We need to agree before we can focus. Otherwise, the team's going in 15 different directions, right? So we need to agree on what we need to do and what priority. And once we can have that agreement, then we can move forward on those initiatives.
That's especially important in a smaller group as startups are, as Broadway shows are, where you don't have 20 people doing each job. You have a product leader who decides what's being built when. You have a technical leader who decides how it's going to be built and makes that happen. You have a commercial leader who decides how you're going to package it and sell it and show it to the world. You have someone helping you recruit people, perhaps. Each of these people, those people I described, usually the founder, the CEO, I should say, is one of those three things. In my case, I'm the commercial person. But if you're a product person, it's the same sort of thing. But I then need to have, as a commercial CEO, I need to have a product person who's way better at product than I am. And I have to believe that they're going to be way better at it. And if we have a conversation, I can say, okay, I'm the CEO, I'm going to have this vision and this is the direction we're going. But I can't compel that into a product. That's what the product person does. And so if we share the same vision, we're doing a 2 product line extensions we haven't announced yet that will be coming out in the next month or 2, both of which are things I had never heard of before they came and told me that they thought this was a good idea. And then they explained to me, here is this thing we think we should build. Here is why it fits in that vision you described. Here is why we think it is essential if we're going to be successful doing this. And it's like, okay, let's do it. And if that's not top down, it can't be.
Yeah. Well, it reminds me once again of theater. We all need to know our roles and responsibilities. Like everyone literally plays a role on that stage, right?
They do. Indeed,
and if you start to play someone else's role or
Well,
if there's not
fortunately,
clear what your role
on
is,
Broadway,
that's
there
a
are
problem.
unions that keep you from doing that. So, but yeah, it's
But
true. It's absolutely true.
imagine a cast that wasn't clear on what their role was,
Yeah,
or they wasn't clear on what their protocol was, right? So I think you have
absolutely.
to really be clear about what are the roles and responsibilities. We have to agree on what success look like. And I'm a big advocate of, like, it's a constant evolution of cadences. It's that quarterly cadence, it's that monthly,
Yep.
that weekly cadence.
Yep.
And I would say that living in a family of, a wife that was theater actor, kids that are in theater, it's always fun to hear about, like, how did practice go today, and
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
all the changes that keep on happening and
Yeah.
iterations all the way up till that first performance,
Yeah.
and then even after those
No.
performances.
And well, it's one of the interesting things about doing it. In this case, I've done one new musical on Broadway so far. I have another one coming up this fall. Is that unlike when I was doing theater, in college or growing up, where here is the script, here is the show. You might interpret it a certain way, but this is the show. Whereas
Mm,
when you have a new musical on Broadway, you start previews every single day. They're rewriting things. Songs come in, songs go out, pages come, pages go. It's you're completely redoing it over the course of 6 weeks of previews um, before you say, okay, now we're freezing it, and that's the show.
that's the product.
Yeah, and that's the product, right? And we're going to do that here at Barndoor as well. We're going to There are elements that I don't understand half of what comes through, but I'm on the email chain and the pull requests and everything that the engineers do, and you see this thing. Yeah, we're going to throw that away because we didn't realize this, this, and this, and now that's not going to work. So it's a big job, but it's gone, and now I have to go build the new one. Like, okay.
It's an iteration, though, right? Is
It
that
is
how you
totally an
see it?
iteration. It's totally an iteration, and it's also uh, our world shifts as we're doing it. We're dealing with this MCP protocol. Well, MCP didn't exist 8 months ago,
Right.
and so it's already as a standard. It's been changed and adapted multiple times. People are using it in different ways, and you got to keep up with that. And part of what we do at Barndoor is we keep up with that on behalf of our customers so they don't have to, right?
Yeah.
It's our job to watch all that and to make sure that things don't break. It's not the customer's job to do.
100%. What was one thing, I mean, thinking of Barndoor, that has surprised you? Maybe you came in with the idea of what it should be, or we're going to do this, but then as you've gotten deeper in this, and you have a different perspective than anybody else, the
Yeah.
work that you guys are doing, what would you
Well,
say has changed?
I would say the emergence and rapid adoption of MCP has been really interesting. That it wasn't a thing when I put my deck together and raised money. It became a thing. Really,
And explain that is for some people that may not
so
know.
yeah, so MCP is a means by which, so if you have AI agents or AIs in general, they can get access to tools and data. They can sort of masquerade as a human and pretend to log in as you and virtually, sort of call a headless thing, pretend to move your mouse and your keyboard and do things like that using the interface that you would use as a human. But that's really inefficient, and it also limits them to do just the things that exist on these screens that someone came up with as the user interface. And MCP bypasses all that and basically just gives you access. It's like an API. It gives you access directly to all of the functions at their basic level. And it does it in a way that is particularly consistent with how AI interacts with things. So it's sort of purpose built as an interface to make it easy for AIs to use. And so this was sort of dreamed up by the folks at Anthropic and released as an open standard that rapidly got adopted. And so if you would have looked at how we were thinking of the way that AIs were going to talk to various tools before, we were talking really, we actually haven't figured out exactly what we were going to do. I think in the back of my mind, I probably figured we'd have to come up with something like this and
Right.
whatever. But then there it was. And saved us a bunch of time and energy. And when we adopted it, we didn't know it was going to become this prevalent. It just was, well, that's one way of doing it, and let's just start playing with that. We'll see how the market goes, but at least that gives us a sort of a hook to get started with. And we were fortunate that when we started building on it in earnest early this year, it turned out to be a standard that really has lasted pretty well.
How do you think companies are going to deal with this like rapid change? Like it seems like technology is changing faster than it has before. Like as an organization, how do you keep up with that?
Well, I think as happens with most technological change, you keep up with it by realizing you don't have much choice, because if you don't, your competitors will, and it becomes a competitive imperative. So I don't know that necessarily travel companies wanted to go to online booking from the old systems, but that's what was happening. And
Right.
when Southwest Airlines popped up and said, we're just letting everybody book and we're not paying travel agents, and I don't care that you at the legacy airlines think that it's too complicated. You better figure out how to make it simple, because it's here, and we're going to eat your lunch if you don't, right?
Right.
And you go back to all these. We've been around long enough to have seen a lot of these technological changes. And when the internet happened, when e-commerce happened, when mobile happened, when APIs and the cloud happened. I remember I was in a cloud conference, or sorry, an infrastructure conference called Interrupt that used to be a huge deal in Vegas every year. It was massive exhibition halls filled with servers and racks and all the things you need, because everybody had to have their own data center. And I was on the nascent cloud panel, and they had all these enterprise CIOs, and they were basically saying, I will never give up the ability to have full control. I will always run a data center because, and I said, look, that's great for you to say, but your CFO is at a better conference, probably in a much better place in Vegas, and she's learning that you can have all this infrastructure with no capex. Who do you think's going to win? Like, just not going to happen, right? And so the imperative is there. And so then you say, okay, how do we evolve in that direction without breaking things, except the things that need to be broken, and continuing to serve our customers and to continuing to fulfill whatever the mission is of the company, but do it in a way that makes us faster, more efficient, and better able to do our jobs. And that's the other part of this, that going back to your future of work, AI doesn't necessarily exist to replace humans. It kind of exists to do things humans can't currently do.
Right.
And so one of the reasons I like MCP is because, as I said before, the alternative is the agent uses user interface screens to mimic a human. But why mimic what we do? We're good at what we do. We're going to do our thing. But you want these agents to actually undertake tasks that we would never have attempted to do, because they would have been just too cumbersome, too big, whatever it was that
Right.
these agents are able to do.
I only have one last question for you. But before I ask that question, it's going to be the most important question you've ever been asked. So I'm glad you're sitting down. But before I ask that question, since I threw a lot at you, I want to give you the opportunity to ask me a question.
You are advising a lot of companies out there and seeing how they're transforming. One of the questions I get asked all the time, so I'll ask it through you, of your companies you work with. Can you identify success stories of implementations of particularly agentic AI in the companies that you deal with, where they're actually seeing positive ROI from what they're doing with AI right now, leaving aside coding co-pilots and chatbots and things like that?
I think for me, at the layer I'm at, I think I have to speak of this broadly. I think that's a really good question.
Mm-hmm.
I'm seeing teams do more than they could do before.
Yep.
I don't see teams scaling down their
Yeah.
workforce at all,
Yeah.
which kind of leads to a question of, are we just going to be doing more with the same amount of people or not?
Yeah.
Where it's very clear ROI, I don't think I have that visibility to really reflect on that. I do see teams accomplishing a lot more than they did before, and their competition's also doing the same. And,
Yes.
a
Yes.
lot of the teams that I work with, what I do with Peak is like my role is not necessarily advising. I would say it's more coaching, aligning the team and getting them to define where they're going, what they're going to do, how they're going to do it. The amount of work that they're putting on their plates has grown, and they're getting it done, I think, more efficiently.
Yeah.
And teams are getting it done more
I've definitely
efficiently.
seen that as well. I've definitely seen that as
And
well.
I think the other piece of that though is my view might be, I have like a 30 million non-profit. That's very different than, a company I'm working with that just raised $120 million Series B. That's, doing something in SaaS and AI. There's two different types of companies.
Oh yeah, very much.
Right. So the ones that are probably that I'm working with that are in tech are definitely using, tools around AI. The other thing that I'm finding though, most of those tools can speed up the work greatly, like 90%, but it's that last 10% they struggle with.
Yeah. And understanding that goes back to all technology and all automation, and this has been since I started my career, is that there's always a slider between, how much you let the automation do and at what point either the edge cases are not worth programming around, or you really do need the human to step in and do that last bit. And getting efficient and cost effective automation, AI, whatever, really is where you put that slider and how far you push it before you get to diminishing returns, or before you actually get to a place where you're losing everything on all the productivity that you thought you were going to have.
Right. I think an example of that would be you could generate a whole bunch of great images, but the image isn't exactly right. You have to throw it into Photoshop. You have to fix it, or maybe you're writing with code with Replit, and you build this really great thing, but then you're trying to tweak this one piece of it, and it keeps on rewriting the code and breaking other things,
or just deleting the whole thing, as happened to
Jason
Lemon. So
it's kind of like you're trying to fix it with a blowtorch when you actually need a scalpel. Right. Yeah. Like I think it comes down to that. I think that last, I don't know what, 10%, or humans have to get back involved in looking at it. So I think that's kind of the stage that we're at right now. Yeah. And I think, like you said, that slider is really interesting. All right. Last question for you. And again, I said this is the most important question, so I'm glad you're sitting down. Okay. It's more of a scenario. All right. So this is a scenario. You're trapped on a desert island the rest of your life. You have plenty of food, you have water, you have everything that healthcare, whatever you want. Beautiful island. The one thing that you don't have, though, is entertainment. There is absolutely no entertainment on this island. But luckily for you, Oren, a 80s boombox drifts ashore with unlimited batteries. But you can only bring one album to listen to for the rest of your life.
Oh my.
What are you going to bring? Now I said 80s.
So that means
I said 80s. So you can do any era or genre. It just happened to be a 80s boombox. It maybe has cassette and DVDs you can put in it. But yeah, any era that you want, but you can only bring one album.
That's a tough one. Probably, and I will age myself a bit. But there was a 3-album set, a three disc set of.
I love it. You're hacking the system. You got like 3 albums in one.
Of Springsteen live performances over a bunch of years that sort of traced his career, and that would probably be something like that. But awesome. I would try to figure out how to reverse engineer that solution, and in addition to the unlimited batteries, get one of those like Columbia House record subscription thingies to deliver to my desert island. And
they still do that? You don't need that 1 penny or the 99 cents or whatever it was?
Exactly. Pay a penny to it and you got 20 albums delivered, yeah.
But your final answer is the boss, Bruce Springsteen.
Yeah, I would say probably boss.
Yeah, that's awesome. I like that you hacked that. You did a three CD set. That was a really
Yeah,
great move.
yeah,
You want that variety. All
exactly, exactly.
right, Oren. Well, thanks for joining me on Tech Scenes. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Good to be here.